Okay, welcome to part two, where we're going to build out the rest of our assets and get to a functioning game gun that we can pick up. In part one, we started with a static mesh of a pump shotgun. We used Blender to break it apart into its component pieces, add a skeleton to it, and then we ended that video with importing it into Unreal into a temporary folder. Now let's go look at some of the other assets that we're going to need and kind of round out sort of our raw material. So there's a lot of assets we need in order to make a gun function in Lyra. The basic assets here in this top corner are the skeletal mesh, the static mesh, the physical asset, etc. So things that are kind of related to the actual gun. We're going to need some sound effects. That's where we're going to start today. We're going to spend a little time on the sound effects. Then we need to put those into some animations so that we have our animation set here, our montages for the various actions that we're going to configure for our weapon. And then at the bottom, we have all of the Lyra data assets for a weapon. So whether it's the actual blueprint class, we actually won't need a projectile on this one, the gameplay abilities, the inventory ID for the guns, the texture that would show up on screen, the ammo counter that shows in the HUD, the unique reticle that handles the center of the screen, the pickup data for picking it up. There are lots of videos on these bottom ones. We will likely do those fairly quickly towards the tail end of the video, and we'll focus more of our time on getting these assets prepared. So let's start with the sound. Obviously, we need to get sound effects. There's a lot of things you can do. You can buy professional sound effects. You can record your own. What I did is I went up and got some free ones for this video. And I went to freesounds.org and I found three sound effects that were all free to use, including commercial. So there's no restrictions on their usage rights of these three. So thank you to these three individuals who uploaded their sound effects for us to use in this tutorial. You can go to freesounds.org, search for any one of these three, either by the name of the contributor or the description on the sound effect, and go ahead and download it. So I've gone ahead and downloaded those three files, and that's where we're going to pick it up. So the first thing we have to do is take that raw material and sound files, make sure our frequencies are the same on all the assets, make sure that our mono or stereo is proper. A couple of cases, we're going to split a sample into two files, and then we need to denoise the, I believe it was the dry fire had some background noise that we're going to go ahead and clean up. So that's what we're going to do. First, let's jump into the editor because we need to understand what our target is. And if you hover over any of the sound effects, either from the pistol or the rifle or the in-game shotgun, you can see here the sample rate is 44. So you notice the sample rate 44, 100, and it's two channels, i.e. it's stereo. So we're going to want to go ahead and match our sound effects to that same frequency, just so that we're not dealing with any conversions. And we're keeping consistent from weapon to weapon. So that's the first step. Now that we know what our target is, we're going to go into Audacity, which is a free sound editing platform you can download online. And let's start by opening up one of the samples. So as I said, I downloaded these, and we will start with the pump. And I will make a copy. And then you simply have this pump action. And what we're going to do is we're going to split that into two different files because we want to be able to have this pump and this pump sort of randomized, since they're slightly different sound effects. So to do that, it's quite simple. We're just going to select the one we want. And we're going to do, actually we can do it this way. Let's delete the front of that, delete the back of that. We are the correct, this is stereo, and the hertz is at 44, 100. so that's good. Just going to go ahead and export that as a wave. And we're going to call it sound effect pump 1. Then I'm going to do Control Z to undo. Now we'll select the front of this one and hit delete. Trim some of this off. So we have that isolated second pump. Export as a WAV file. And we're going to call that pump 2. All right, so we're done with splitting the pump into 2 pieces. Now we're going to open, that was the pump. We're going to open the second one. And you'll notice this one, the frequency is right, but it's a mono clip. So this one's mono, and we're going to want to make it stereo. There's a couple of ways you can do that. You can add a new stereo track. So that makes this track stereo and this track mono. Then we can grab what we want off this. We're actually going to trim this back here a little bit. So we just do that. Control C. Put our cursor here and just line it up at the beginning. Control V. And we have that sound effect now in the stereo channel. We can delete that channel. And when we play it, the back here, we don't want. Right? We want it to end and not include this in our sound effect. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this piece here, delete it, and then we're going to take this piece right here, since it's a very abrupt ending, and we're going to fade out. You see how that shrunk the picture to be more streamlined? So that gives us a bit better single shot without the clicking in the back. So that's our fire, and we're set properly there. We're going to export as a wave, and this is SE pump fire. And then we're going to do this one more time with the third sample. In this one, you see we have some noise here in the middle. And if I play this, you kind of hear that noise down through the middle. So what we're going to do is we're going to select the piece that's kind of noisy. You can see it here in this area. We're going to go under Effects, Noise Reduction, and we're going to say that's our noise. This is the noise I want to remove. Get the noise, and Control A to select it all. Back into Effect, Noise Reduction, and this time we're going to reduce the noise. And you'll see that these will disappear. And we have a cleaner, there's no, so what I'm going to just do is I'm going to delete the front, the back, tighten that up a little bit more. All right, and that's our dry file. Oh, on this one, our sampling was the wrong hertz. So we're going to go under Resample, and we're going to drop that down. All right, so now we're consistent. Sound effect, pump, dry fire. All right, so now we have our file assets. We're going to go ahead and import them into Unreal. All right, so back in the editor, when we finished the other video, we'd use this temp folder. And we have our material, our skeleton, our physical asset, our skeletal mesh, skeleton, and the texture. So what we're going to do is go into our shooter core and my weapons folder. And I'm still debating what to call this. I think I'm going to just call it pump. It's a bit of a odd, just call it pump. All right, so in that folder, to be consistent with our other folders, we're going to have the folder, then asset, and then our various elements are going to fit under asset. So mimicking that, I'm going to go I might as well make all of these now since. All right, so let's go first grab everything out of temp. I'm just going to take all of those and move them to pump. So that now I can safely, without warning, start moving things around. So the first thing I want to do is this is going to be material pump. Texture pump mask. And the skeleton, this should be the skeletal mesh. This physical asset. All right. So the texture goes into the textures. The material goes into materials. All three of these go. All three of these go into mesh. And now we're going to import our sound effects. All right, so we have sound effect, pump, pump one, pump two, fire, and dry fire. Save all. If we go back and take a quick look, so we're going to have to create our meta sounds, but we've now got our sound samples, our sound effect samples. We need to create a static mesh. We have the skeletal mesh, we have the physics asset, and we have the skeletal mesh, skeleton and skeletal mesh. So we need to do the static mesh. And that's really easy to make the static mesh. We're going to go into skeletal mesh, to our mesh folder. We're going to open the skeletal mesh up. And there is an option to make a static mesh out of this skeletal mesh. So we're going to hit click that. And unfortunately, I've got to open up where we want it. And we're going to call it static mesh pump. Okay. And now we have the static mesh as well. So we have our skeletal mesh and our static mesh.
All right, so next we're going to need to create our control rig. The easiest way to create the control rig and associate it with the skeletal mesh is to go to your skeletal mesh, right click, create control rig. This will do the two steps of creating the control rig and associating the skeleton with the control rig. So first thing I'm going to do is rename that control rig pump. We're going to open that up. And the first thing we're going to do is you may show up, let's see, you might be on. You probably have this window open when you start. And it probably looks something like that when you start. You're going to go ahead to control rig, which will, rig hierarchy, which will show you the bones. And the first thing we're going to do, for this video, I'm going to show you the magazine or the pump on the pump shotgun. You could animate the trigger and the door and all the other aspects, but I'm just going to do the one for the sake of the video. The exact same process will apply to all the other pieces. So what I'm going to do is go to the magazine bone, and I'm going to right click, go to new, control. And you won't see much happen. We get this red dot, and you notice that we've got a control rig here, the same name as the bone I had selected, and it's a child of the bone. If I click the control rig and go over into the details properties, the first thing we're going to want to do is change this shape. So your shape properties might be closed. Go ahead and open it. And I'm going to choose, I believe I went with Arrow. What type did I go with? Oh, Arrow 2 Solid. Arrow 2 Solid, you see that it changed the look of that. And then here in the transform, I'm actually just going to move it. I've already factored this in. I'm going to move it 25 on the X. I'm going to move it 10 on the Y. So it's here. And then I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. And I'm going to scale it by 2. Now it's important to do these here in the shape properties, not here in the viewport. What you're basically just doing is changing the visual elements of this control. And so by doing that, you can change the color if you want. By doing that here, you've just changed the way it looks on screen. The next thing is you will have this transform, initial, current, offset, min, and max. For min, I went ahead and set all of these to their default. I'm basically locking all of the transforms, rotations, and scales, except in the x-axis, I'm going to allow it to go back 10 Unreal units. And then in max, I'm going to put them all locked. The check mark locks the position. So we basically said, okay, you can only move this control in the x-axis. In other words, you can only go forward and backwards. And you can only go forward to 0, which is where it is sitting right now, or 10 units backwards. So this basically constrains this. You can't move it up or down, left or right. You can only go forwards and backwards from this position back minus 10. That's what the min and max on these constraints are here. Now to test that out, what we're going to do is we're going to grab the controller and drop it in the graph. And we're going to get the controller. So that basically gets the controller in global space. And then we're going to drag the magazine bone and we're going to set the bone. So when we execute the solve, we're going to take whatever the transform is, which has been constrained, and apply that to the bone. And that's pretty much it for this control rig. What that'll allow me to do is select this. I can't pull it forward. I can pull it back that far. It's as far back as I'm allowed to go. And I can't move it up or down. And I can't rotate it. So it's locked to that chamber based on these settings. And then every time I move the transform of the control, the corresponding bone will move. And because the bone moves, all of this mesh moves with it. So we now have our functioning control rig. We're going to use this control rig to generate some animation. I'm going to compile. Let's see.
All right, with our control rig created, we're going to use a level sequence. Now, I don't want to do it in this map, kind of throwaway, so I'm going to actually create a new level. And I'm going to call it Animation Studio, for lack of a better name. Studio. And we're going to open that up. And we need a couple of basics. We need directional light. We need a sky atmosphere. Where's volume? Can never find the sky atmosphere. There it is. All right, so we have a sky atmosphere and we have a sun. And the only other thing we probably need is a plane. So basic shape plane. And let's scale that up to, I don't know, 100 by 100. Yeah, all right. So at this point, we have a basic level, and you can at least see it. When we, let's save it. Whenever you drag the control rig into a level, it'll generate a level sequence with that control rig and that mesh. So we're going to take this, drag it into our level, and as soon as you let go, it's going to do this. And so it popped you into animation mode. It loaded the asset into the screen, and it loaded sequencer here. And so this is kind of the basic setup for starting to animate something. And let's just zoom in so we can. All right, so there's our asset. And we can start to animate this. Let's see if I want to save this first. I want to save that. Oh, where did it save it? Auto named it here. I like this to be called level sequence. All right, so this is now our level sequence, so we can find it again if we need to. And it automatically added the control rig into the scene. So the first thing we're going to do is we can only change our location X. So let's go ahead and keyframe that right there. And I'm going to first go maybe a couple of seconds forward. We're going to move this later anyway. And in that position, I'm going to grab the control rig and pull it all the way back until it locks to our constraint. I'm going to press this plus to add a keyframe. And if I hit play on that, oops, let's bring this back in to about here. This is your begin and your end. So we have, you can see here, we have the frame count at the bottom. And if I play that, it slides back. So we've just created our first animation. Now it's not a terribly impressive animation, but it is at least using the control rig, keyframing the control rig in the level sequencer, and us being able to see the gun reacting in real time. So now what we want to do is probably think about how would a gun uh, pump action really look, right? Introduce some jittery effect to it. It obviously doesn't stop here, it returns back. So we could go to our end position here, which is where our cursor is. So if we put our end position here, we could type 0 and basically keyframe that 0 here. So now it will go all the way back and then go all the way forward. So that's our current animation. And it's currently moving in a linear curve. So we probably want to change the speed. To do that, we open up our graph editor. So this graph here shows you your curves. And when you play through, you see that it starts here, moves down, moves back up as the motion. And just like the other graph editors, you can grab the points, make your adjustments. So in this case, I think it starts slower. Probably ends a bit more abruptly. In fact, we probably want to add a key right here. Bring that down so that we're kind of flattening out at the bottom. Maybe we want to stay there a little bit longer. So what we did is we added a pause in the fully retracted phase. And so you can basically just play around with not only the animation, but you may want to grab the points and tighten it down so it's going faster. You can always key that value in. I'm going to take these, move them. But here I still want to be at fully retracted -10. And that should move a little faster. So you spend your time editing and adjusting this until you get exactly the way you want. You may want to add the door. Oh, went too close. You may want to add the door that when you pull the lever all the way back, the door pops open. Those are all things that you can edit using different control rate elements in the sequencer, using the curves until you get exactly what you want as your overall animation. And to do that, we're first going to maybe clean this up a little bit because our start and ends are a little longer than our animation, right? So our end of our animation is here and our start is here. So that's probably okay. Let's hit play one more time. All right, so that seems to be functioning. We've got it animated. Now to export it, we're going to basically right click here at the top and you're going to get a bunch of different options. So you could create a linked anim sequence, which is more of a dynamic anim sequence, or you can go ahead and bake it. This will just basically take all the interpolated keyframes and bake a fixed animation based on the duration of this animation and the 30 frames per second. So I'm running at 30 frames per second. So we're going to go ahead and bake. And we're going to go to the animations folder. And let's call this our animation asset for pump. I'm mixing up reload and fire, but let's just call this fire for the video. And then you get some options on what you want to do with exporting it. I just picked defaults. All right, and I got one anim sequence created. So if we go to our control panel, let's just do a file save all. If we go to our animations, we now have our new anim asset. If we double click that, you'll see that we have basically the 20 frames that we recorded in the level sequencer. And you can now use this to create a montage and do everything you need to do to add all the effects around it. So that's basically taking the control rig, putting it into a level sequence. Again, I like to do it in a separate level so as not to mess up my production levels. And then baking out an anim sequence. And from there, we'll just kind of keep moving down the path. All right, next we need anim blueprint and we need a montage. So let's create the montage first. Right click the anim, oh, not modifier, create, sorry, anim montage. That's our anim montage on fire. This will allow us to do a few different things with the montage. First thing we want to make sure is we get our group right. So we are default group, default slot. So that's good. That is what the montage is playing in. Go ahead and save that one. We're going to create a new anim instance. Off the pump. Oops. I think that's what I was calling them. Yeah, anim blueprint. Okay. And open that up. And we're going to need the slot. Default. Yeah. Slot, default slot. Double check that's correct. And then we just need to throw in the local space reference pose. Okay. So now when we play the anim montage in this slot on this anim blueprint, it will kick in and override and output the correct animation on the skeleton. Go back to our check. We've got all of our assets, including our level sequence and our control rig. We've got our anim asset. We've got our blueprint. We've got our fire montage. We're going to need to clone some of the animations off of the mannequin, which we'll just copy right off of this M32 and just duplicate those. Let's go do that next. So I am going to just copy those four, Control C, Control V. So what these are the characters animation for each of these actions. So when you're equipping, which many of them you can use the same animation, or you can go in and tweak them. Last one. I just like to have separate copies of the asset so that if I do choose to author one, I can just replace this. So if we open up, look a little bit better. Oh, Let's stop that. I'm going to go change the preview asset. So right here we have this gun as our preview. I'm going to go remove attached assets. That gets rid of the gun. And then we're going to add the pump. Doesn't matter. We'll take this. All right, so now in this animation, we're holding the pump. Now we got to do some adjustments and settings to get the hand in the right position. But everything else is firing. These are the M32 loading shell sound effects, etc. But we're going to want to change all that to be our shotgun. So we ran into a bit of a workflow issue in that I thought I'd be able to create all the animations and just kind of work through them sequentially. It looks like we're going to have to do it a little bit different for the pump action shotgun, and it hit me on the reload. So for the Lyra weapons of the pistol, the rifle, and their canister-based shotgun, the reload is a single motion of pulling the cartridge out and reinserting a new cartridge. So regardless of how many ammo has been spent, the action and the sound effect is consistent. In a pump action shotgun, you actually have to have the right number of shells going in based on the total magazine size and how many shells have been spent. So it's a little more complicated than this action, where we play a sound at the beginning, we play a sound for reload and close, but the actual animation that the character is playing through is is one common thing. So the hand comes off the gun, it grabs a hold of the magazine, it pulls that magazine, throws it away, it grabs another magazine from behind the character, and it loads it back in the gun. We can't use that animation because in a pump action shotgun, you basically have to. So what I've done is I broke apart pump one into pump open and pump close. And then I found a slightly different sound for loading the shell. So in this case, what would happen is you would play this sound. That's opening the chamber. Load as many shells as you need. And then close. And each of those is going to require a separate animation that we're going to have to offer. So in order to make this easier, I think what we're going to go ahead and do is just replicate the rest of the assets real quick so that we can load all of this up in the editor and see it all working together. So we're going to quickly go ahead and clone most of these other assets over into the shotgun so that we can pick it up in game. Now, the actual sequence of these is definitely need to think about how am I going to do this effectively. Let's try copying all. And we do not need the projectile, and we do not need the texture. Well, the rest of those should be okay. Copy, paste. And that's probably okay. Yeah, so this one, we're just going to go ahead. We're going to go ahead and just kind of rename all of them at the very beginning. The weapon instance. The gameplay ability. The reload ability. The ammo counter. pickup data and the weapon ID. Okay, so we're gonna have to go through and edit all these. Let's start with the actual blueprint. And that skeletal mesh needs to change, and the animal class that we built needs to change. So skeletal mesh, I'm gonna go pump action. That should change the material on it. The anim blueprint needs to be the oops pump action, and then the viewport. Oh, let's compile. Why is that still showing? Showing the preview window. Oh, all right, not sure what that was, but now showing the pump action shotgun in that B weapon style class, and there's nothing in the graph to worry about. And if I look at, I think this has changed here. Okay, we can come back and check some of those things later. We've got that done. This is a bit tedious, but we're going to go through and double check all of them. Go into the weapon instance. All right, we're going to we'll change some of these later. When we equip, we're going to want to play the pump action equip. We'll change that later. And unequip is generic. That's okay. Melee attack. I don't think I copied melee attack, did I? I probably did. It's in the same folder. Did not. So let's go quickly to find that one. It should have been in this folder. It is not. Melee pistol, rifle, shotgun. Oh, I have it somewhere. I have it under character actions. Okay. So animation, actions. Feels like that's in the wrong spot. So I'm going to go ahead and move that. Can't imagine why I have that there. All right, I'm going to move that into our animations. And I'm going to copy that into pump. And go back to where I was. It was here. Yeah. What did I call? Copy, paste, do. All right, not sure what I did wrong last time. So we've set those at montages and the anim layer. So we need to copy that as well, which I have under locomotion. So these may need to stay here. There's probably a logical reason why. I have the male and female. So what we're going to do here is in the character locomotion, create. I may move these later for now. I'm going to copy those. Okay, and I'm going to rename this. This is the linked layers for both male and female. And this is where we'll actually do the hand adjustment logic in each of those. And then this is the idle hip fire, which I did not copy here. Again, I think there's a reason for it, so we're going to leave them here for now. And the MM and MF stand for mannequin male and female. So when you see these assets that are deemed F and M, they're female and male. We have the layers female and male. I'm just going to take a quick note to go into character locomotion under Annie so that I come back here later. But we have those assets, so we can keep changing the default layer here to our pump anim layer. And then I'm just scrolling down to see that none of these have been changed. So there's no need to change any of those. We can actually save the weapon instance. Go back to our main folder. So we did that, and we did the weapon instance, the gameplay ability to fire. There's a firing montage, which we're going to pump montage in. Yeah, let's see what else this thing does. All right, this one's spawning a projectile, which I don't think we need. Let's go take a look at the VA weapon. Shotgun. That is going to be in the Shield core. Weapon, fire, shotgun. Let's take a look at it's the gameplay ability, weapon fire. You know what? Probably better off copying this one since it's a shotgun. G weapon fire. Yeah, obviously I did some adjustments on the M3 because we are spawning projectile in the world. That's probably not the best one to copy from the pump action. So we undo that and copy the other one. Just copying that down into our weapon. And we're going to close this one. We're going to delete the pump fire. Change that to pump. That just means we're going to act just like their shotgun. So we're going to use the damage shotgun. Uh, we're going to use, instead of shotgun fire, use pump fire. And we're going to keep that impact, the rate of play. I think we're going to keep all of these for now. And we'll have to discuss the magazine ammo is fine, so that should be good for the fire. Okay. So we did fire. Now we have to do a reload. Doesn't look like we edited the standard reload at all. So we're going to change this to pump. Reload. And everything else looks to be the same. Again, this is a tedious process, but I've left this one for last. I'd like to do the items first. All right, what is the display name for this? So there's a pump. And what fragments do we have on it? All right, so the skeletal mesh is going to change to pump. And the display name under that is going to be this. Oh, let's fix that while we're here. Uh, we're going to do the weapon definition for the pump. I don't think we've finished configuring yet. The quick bar, we don't have a good icon for that. So let's leave those, but we'll actually, we can probably change the ammo to the shotgun. Pistol, rifle. So we can go ahead and change the ammo icon to be the shotgun and still have to come back and change the actual gun icon. We'll do that later. And let's close those fragments. The actual reticle that goes into screen and the ammo counter, we're going to change both of those to pump. Okay. These magazine size, we're going to leave. Yeah, we're going to leave all these for now. And then we did not create an inventory icon. So we'll leave that for now. We'll come back and change that later, I'm sure. But we can change the name. Just so we know we have the right one. And it can be dropped, clean, stored. Okay. All right. And save that. The ammo counter, the reticle, we're not going to bother changing it. It's just where does it sit on the screen. And this looks like this. There's some different options you can change. So those are pretty fine for now. We just want to get the gun up and running. All right. Noises are fine. Here's why we needed the static mesh as opposed to the skeletal mesh. That's why we need a copy of it. And it will equip the ID pump. So that's what you actually get when you pick it up from a weapon spawner. And the actual weapon ID itself. This is the blueprint that we changed the picture to pump shotgun. All right, the ability set. We haven't changed it yet, but we're going to change it right now. And then we'll go over there and change the ability set. That's the ability set you get. This is what we spawn into the world. This is the socket. And then this is what we need to be adjusting to get our right hand in the right spot. So we're going to come back to this one very soon. And now we need the ability set. So what abilities do I get? I get the fire and reload, but I need them to be the pump. Fire the pump, and then reload. All right, so those are the two abilities I get when I pick up, and they're going to be bound to our input tags for fire and reload. All right, so that was a lot of editing for just getting these set up generally in the right direction, tying it to the right assets that are in our subfolder so that all of that should be working. And we should be able to take the weapon spawner, paste it level, drag it out, and let's make this one a different color so we remember. And we're going to say that the weapon definition is not the rocket launcher, but in fact it's the weapon data for the, not the pistol, for the pump. You'll see that that changed the weapon that's being displayed on this pad. If you wanted to, you can change the light intensity. You can move the offset of the mesh. It's basically up 50 from the mesh, but you can pull it back a little bit in the, so I can do -20. That's the light. The light. Okay, well, you position it on the pad as you see fit. And if we did everything right, we should be able to play here. Check what I'm playing. Standalone in viewport. Okay. So if I get the pink one, all right, I am given the shotgun. If I press F8, all right, fire around, you'll see that the hand placement, because we haven't edited anything, is where the rifle hand placement is. And what we're going to want to do is move the left hand here to the magazine, and we're going to move the right hand to the trigger, and we'll probably want to move the stock barrel back if I get it lined up with the shoulder. So we're going to make those adjustments first with the right hand, then with the left.
Okay, so we're starting to experience some audio issues, so I'm attempting to re-record the sections from this point forward. Hopefully everything lines up well. It won't be as much editing live as it will be me redoing the audio portions and attempting to recreate it. So hopefully the audio picks up clearer this time. If you're watching along, you probably noticed it was degrading. And so we got to this point and I thought it was a good reset. So we're at the point where we're going to be positioning the right hand on the stock of the weapon. And to do that, I've opened up the pump, idle, hip, fire as sort of the base reference pose, of which many other poses are built off of as a foundation. And what we're trying to do is ultimately determine what is the values that we need to type into the WID pump for the attach. And we're attaching to the weapon R socket. And again, you can change this to attach to anything you want, but that is where we are attaching the weapon. That is the connection point between the character and the weapon. And then we have this option to do some offset location rotation and scale, typically just location rotation. And I found the easiest way to see that visually and play with it is to go into an animation like this. You can pause it if you'd like to stop things from moving. Go over to the skeleton tree. Scroll down until you find your attach point. In our case, it's the weapon right. And when the weapon is physically attached, it's attached to this bone and then it's offset by this amount. To simulate that, I like to add this socket. So you do a right click on weapon right, you add socket, and I just named it weapon right preview only. Just as a reminder to me that that socket is not used in the code anywhere. It's simply meant to allow me to preview a weapon asset. And then if I remove all attached assets from that socket, you see that the pump goes away. And then I can add the preview asset as the shotgun, and it really doesn't matter which one. And so if I zero out the weapon preview, so I make the preview exactly the same as the socket, you'll notice that the gun snaps into the wrong position. So we automatically know our rotation is off. So let's put our rotation at -90. That puts the gun in the right position. Now you can play with that. It doesn't need to be a perfect 90-degree angle. You can adjust that a little bit if you want the gun pointing left or right a little bit, but that seems to track down through the hands fairly well. At 0, you'll note that the hand is slightly forward. This is snapping to the pivot point that we put on the gun. Now we could go back to Blender and move the pivot point back, or we can start adjusting these values. So if we take the values and just start moving them, you'll see that the gun shifted forward by 4. So we'll go back to 0, and then 4, oops, not 45, 4, and that seems to put the hand about where I want it. The rotation is slightly off. I don't want the finger where the finger is, but it does put the wrist just about where I want it in the on the stock of the gun. And then I think I found that -2 and 5 were good values. So if I do -2 here, yeah, it shifts the gun. See how -2 moved the gun a little more this way, stopping the clipping of the finger. You would do maybe -1. And then the other value I thought that was pretty good was 5. So when I went this way and I looked at the gun here, 5 might be a bit high. 4, 3, that feels about right. So you can play with those values based on where each weapon sits, and it helps you align that right hand so that the gun is sitting appropriate in the right hand position. Next, we're going to talk about the spacing between the, so before I do that, then you want to do is copy these values into your WID. Those are the values that are here, and we already have -9. So when the game plays, these are the values that it's going to use. So make sure that you copy those over and save them before you keep moving. And then next, we're going to talk about the distance of how the gun centers between the left and the right hand using the hand FK weighting. So I wanted to show the effect of adjusting the hand FK weight. It's a little subtle, But what the hand FK weight does, which you can find in your child class of the item anim layers, so in our case the pump anim layers file, the same file that has all of the various poses. If you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see this hand FK weight, and I believe it starts at 0.8. What it does is it splits the gun position between the right hand and the left hand. And so as you will do some dramatic changes, if you say 0.1, the gun should move backwards and in alignment with the right hand. You see it shifted there. If I go 0.9, it's going to weight heavier to the left hand, and it shifts there. So this is another setting that you can use to sort of get the, maybe from above I can get a better view. Let's go 0.1, and the gun shifts to the left. 0.9 shifts to the right. So it's weighting where that gun sits between the left and right hands, both left to right and forward and backwards. So 0.5 puts it kind of in the middle, and you can see its placement on the shoulder shifting slightly left and right. So it's another variable that you can use to get your gun placement the way you want. This case here is a little bit tighter into the center of the character. 0.5 splits it in between. And finally, we have to talk about the left hand. Now, as I said in my other video, the proper way to do this is to hand author the left hand placement and moving the virtual bone in the root animations. If you don't have the time, patience, or resources to do that, this is a quick modification that will get your hand generally close. It's not perfect, but it gets it basically where it needs to be. So the first thing you need to do is jump into your content character hero mannequin. I just put a shortcut here. You go into the animations, and you go into the anim mannequin base. So this is a change to the base Lyra code. And when you open it, you are not going to see this little piece of code here. So what you're going to do is right click and add the blueprint update anim event. So just update event blueprint update anim. That'll give you this node. Then you can do the get owning actor, cast that to a pawn. What I did is I created a function. So I went to my functions and I hit plus. I created a new function called update left hand IK target. And let's just go into that function. There's a macro that Lyra gives you. So if you just type Lyra get weapon, what it does is takes a pawn and attempts to return the B weapon that pawn is holding. Upon success of that, we know that B weapon, we go to our child, right? We know that B weapon has a skeletal mesh in it, and that each weapon will have its corresponding skeletal mesh. So we can safely pull that skeletal mesh off of that, and then we can find a socket in world space. Now, this part you need to add to your meshes. So if we go to our pump assets, meshes, skeletal mesh, you want to check your sockets. So you've got to add the shell eject socket. This is so that shells know where to eject from the weapon. And if you look at all the Lyra assets, they have this slot here for shell eject. You need the muzzle, so it knows where to do the muzzle flash. And then we're adding this left hand. So what we're doing is we're adding a socket somewhere here. We're going to manipulate it in a minute, but somewhere in and around where we want the left hand, we need to create this left hand socket on the actual weapon. Because when we're in here, we're going to get the actual weapon, and we're going to look for that actual socket. So this name has to match whatever we call this socket. And then we're going to get that transform, and we're going to get the location, which break transform. So we're going to get that transform. So get socket, get transform. I can't remember which it is. Get socket transform. It's written right there. And then break this pin, right click and break it, and then store this into a variable and the rotation into a variable. So there's 3 variables that we've added. For the left-hand IK, we've added the socket, which is just a name. We've added a vector where we're going to store the left-hand target, and we've added a rotator where we're going to store the rotation. So make sure you're getting them in world space. We're reading this variable, and we're writing those 2. And that's all we're really doing in the mannequin base. And like I said, that is happening on the game thread. So this is running on game thread, which means when we go access these, we want to be getting them thread safe because we're not running our animations in the game thread. So that's kind of change number 1. Change number 2. So I don't need this anymore. I don't need this anymore. We'll come back to that. Change number 2 is also in the mannequin animations. So this is under your content characters hero mannequin animations. Under your linked layers, you're going to have this item anim layers, and this is the parent of all of the weapons layers. So if we open this up, we'll see all of the animations that will vary by weapon. And what we did in here is if you chase through the code and you find this full body skeletal controls, so this is the function that I think it's in the anim layer. Yeah, so under the item anim layers, full body skeletal control. So if you click that, you'll come to this. And when you come in here, this is not going to be here. So all of this won't exist, and it'll just run from here to here. And if you look at it, the hand weighting is really what is the parameter that shifts the weight between the left and right hand. You can see that that's handled here. And then the very next thing it does, and this is what was causing challenges, is that the IK hand, the virtual bone, so the source bone was the virtual bone, and the target bone was the IK hand target. And so this was being copied here, and then the hand IKs here, so this left hand IK was using that hand IK, which was just copied right here. So this copied the virtual bone to the same location as the IK hand left, then this performs the left hand IK. So what we need to do is make sure that that virtual bone is exactly where we want it before this copy bone node ever occurs. And the way we did that is with this code right here. So let me bring it back. We bring that back up. Actually, let's just Control Z it back up. All right. So a couple things you need to know. You need to get the values that we were setting in the main anim montage for that IK location and IK rotation. You don't just get those variables. So you need to use a property access here. And when that comes up, you take this drop down and you're going to ask for off of the main anim thread save. And you're going to scroll down this list. And these are all the variables that you could pick up off the main animation. And way down at the bottom, you can see the 3 that we added: the socket, the IK in its vector form, or you can get the X or the Y or the Z, the rotation and pitch, yaw, and roll. So you can pull any of those variables into this thread save piece of code. And so we grab the target location and target rotation. So that's using these property accessors, which will get you the thread safe value. You can see that it says thread safe right there. First thing we did is we did two transforms of the bone. The target bone is the virtual bone in both cases. In this case, what we did is we don't do the rotation. We simply say, okay, expose the translation. So you'll have to say bone to modify is here. Translation, make that a pin. The translation mode is to replace the value with whatever I'm sending it in. And we're in world space, so that we know that this value was in world space, and therefore it will replace it with this world space value. And that will move the virtual bone to this location. We do the same thing here for rotation. So we expose the rotation as a pin. Notice this is no longer exposed as a pin. This was a pin, this was not a pin. Now this is a pin, this is not a pin. We're going to replace it again, but this time we're going to do it in component space. And so we'll take this rotation and we'll put it here into component space. So by doing that, we move the location and rotation of the virtual bone so that the very next node will pick that up and place it in the right spot. And so that allows us to constant. One last thing is in this particular inside the item anim layer, we chose to add this extract left-hand position bool, and we just added that as a variable, and it's defaulted to false. That's because we don't want this code to run for the pistol, the rifle, or the shotgun, because their virtual bones have been authored into the right position. So this allows us to toggle on and off in the children anim blueprints, these linked layers, whether or not we want this code to run or not. And that's why these have this flag enabled here. So when you enable this, only if this is true. So, and that's down, you're going to see that down here. Whether or not this is enabled is based on a bool value in this variable. That makes those work. With that, you can then have a child with that class, which is actually the locomotion pump. So that is in the shooter core plus character, hero, mannequin, animation, location pump. This is the child, and the child for the male and female. So if we double click this one, we can see that if we scroll all the way down to that extract, it's set to true. Means for this particular weapon, we want our code to run. All right, so now how do we get the actual hand in the right position? So just like we did for the right hand in pulling up a live window, so we just basically launched the game. I've pressed F8 to eject me out of the character so I can see how it looks in final game. I can now manipulate the left-hand socket on the shotgun, and the hand will track to where that socket is. So if I take this socket and I start to move it around, you'll see that the hand will attempt to IK to this socket location. So this is the process of saying, okay, where do I want that sort of wrist to be? And then I'll manipulate the fingers last. So I'll find a spot that feels about right. Take a look at it from different angles. That's actually not bad. I might hit some rotation. And what I'm really rotating is the wrist here. So I get to a position that I think the wrist is in a good spot. Rotate that down a little bit like that. Then grab the location, drag it down a little bit. It's important to kind of keep looking at it from different angles because you'll quickly realize that you might be off left to right. Okay, then you see the arm gets kind of hyperextended if I go too far. So we're trying to find it so that the arm still has enough relaxed position on it. So you can see that if I turn my wrist a little more, those fingers will come closer. And you basically just keep playing with this until you get the look you want. And then we'll go in and we'll actually play with the finger mask last. But I kind of like to get the wrist just about where I want it. That feels just about right. So we've got the hand just about where I want it. It's a little too far. You see that it's tracking as the gun moves, the hand moves. It's not 100% perfect, but it's definitely moving with the gun. But I've got it too far to that side. So all right, so the next thing we're going to do is actually make sure our fingers are in the positions we want our fingers to be in, and then our hands should be roughly where we want them. Okay, so now we've come to the actual fingers. This is going to take a few seconds. All right, so you're going to change the finger locations in the idle hip fire, which is the base animation. Many of the fire animations are additive animations that are additive to this base position. And so this is a good one that we're going to open this up. And what we're going to deal with, let's blow this up full screen first. So you'll notice if you come in here that your left hand position is not where we positioned it in game. So in this case, our code is not running to shift this hand forward like it was before. The right hand should be in the right spot only because we have the preview slot set to the exact same settings as that weapon ID. So the right hand will be in the right spot, but the left hand is basically going to be kind of here. And the first thing we want to do is go in here and take a look under this settings icon, under the skeletal tree, at the left finger mask. That's the mask that gets applied to the left fingers. And here you can scroll up and down and see the bones that will be applied during the left finger mask. So these are the bones in which the left finger mask is applied. So these are the bones that we can adjust here. If we adjust bones outside of this, they're not part of the mask. They're not going to have any effect in game. And what we basically do is we're going to add some additive layer tracks to each of the bones to adjust the finger positions. So to do that, I'm going to stop the animation. And I'm going to bring it all the way back to frame 0. So if we make changes at frame 0, that change will hold through the rest of the sequence. And we're basically going to do some additive editing. So the first one I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take the left hand, and I want to get the left hand about where it's going to be in the final product, so that when I start moving the fingers, even though this is going to get overridden, I want to kind of get it close to where it's going to be in game. And then there's a couple of ways you can do this, right? So I'm going to basically, right here, you see that I have no additive layers. I've selected the hand bone. I'm going to hit the key button. And you can see that I now have an additive track for that bone. And it's great. It's locked the translation, rotation, and scale at this point. And so I can further enhance that. So right now it hasn't moved, but I can move it. And let's just do this quickly because this is just a tutorial. I'm going to try to grab these two and move it forward because I think our hand was roughly here and our hand was a little higher. So let's say our hand was roughly like that. And I hit key again, and that's going to key this location at frame 0. And I just keep keying in these new locations. Right? And then, of course, when you save it, those keys are going to be saved. So what you'll do then is, let's say, I'm just going to do one here because you get the idea. I'm going to wrap this thumb down towards the gun. Again, just as an example. So I'm going to go to thumb 1, which is the base. Thumb 2 is the middle. Thumb 3 is the tip. If I go to thumb 1, I go into rotation. I rotate that thumb a little bit. 10. Add a keyframe there. You'll see thumb 1 shows up in the additive track. Thumb 2. Rotate again. Key it. Thumb 2 shows up in the rotation. Thumb 3. Rotate it twice so that I get the thumb closer to the gun. Don't forget to key it. And you can just continue this process with all the various fingers until you get the hand where you like it. And that's going to adjust the position of the left hand fingers. And again, you're doing that in the pump, idle, hip fire. You have to do it in the female as well. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. And we basically have our fingers adjusted using these additive tracks. Again, if you want them to move around, you can add other keyframes to have them move around. But basically, I just wanted to wrap the gun a little bit better. So with all 3 of them together, we've got or 4 of them, I guess, we've got the right hand position based on the WID. We've got our left to right IK factor at whatever ratio we want. We've used our socket to position the wrist where we want it relative to the gun. And then we're adjusting our fingers. And to show you that live, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this thumb that's on this weapon, and I'm going to over-rotate this, 2, 3, 4. And then when I hit the key, kind of watch the thumb over here. You see how it snapped down. So if I undo that with Control Z, you see the thumb come back up. So you can manipulate each of the individual fingers by using this mask and by doing additive to the idle hip fire frame. So this way you can play around as much as you want, change these things, maybe go back to the mesh shotgun, take that left hand socket, make further adjustments like this, right? And then go back to the finger placements, make more adjustments, always remembering to key those finger placement adjustments. And then you'll basically be able to play around and get your hand the way you like. So hopefully that's helpful for those that were struggling with that part of the prior tutorial.
All right, so next we're going to go into the pump animation layers. And let's make sure that all of the animations, the montages that we're using are the best possible starters. The best way to do that is go look at the shotgun from Epic. And you'll note that in their shotgun anim layers, they use the rifle for many of the idles. Right, so rifle, 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 rifle. The left-hand pose override, they use shotgun, idle, hip fire. So what we're going to do is make sure that we use, I think, not sure what that's showing. Oh. We're going to use rifle, 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 rifle. And then right here, we're going to change this to pump. And we're going to make sure the male uses the male. So I'm in the male. So I want to make sure I pick MM. right, next we're going to create, let's go ahead and create a inventory icon, which will eventually need to be 128 by 128. We're going to go to the pump mesh. Yeah, in the static mesh. So I get this about where I want it. Slow this camera down a little bit. So I'll get this in the skeletal mesh view. We're going to position the shotgun so that we have lots of space around it. And we're going to use this shared profile that I have called black background. So basically what that just means is you can change things like your lighting conditions, your environmental settings, whether or not you're showing the floor or not showing the floor, and save that, and then put the background to black. So you can have the different background. Again, we're going to go with black. And basically that allows us to snag a screen. And I usually go a little further than I want, like that. Copy that. I tend to use GIMP for edit processing, another free app. Then I'll do a Control V to bring that gun in. And I need my texture to be 128 by 128. So I'm going to do a select, and I'll probably have to play with this a little bit. What I basically want to do is make it a square. So I'm looking at the bottom of the screen, right down here, and I'm dragging this out until I get, we'll probably want that much black on that side, that on that side, and I want it to be, yeah, we're about 5. We're about 690, so I need to go higher. 635. Okay, we're getting close. I'll move that down a little bit. We're going to get into fine tuning. So we're now going to say, okay, I want it to be 690 by 690. So that's perfect square. I'll move it till I'm basically in the middle of that. Image, crop to selection, image, scale to 128 by 128. And then I'll export that. And then I'll import that texture file. And we end up with our texture. So then I can open up my ID pump. I looked this up. A pump shotgun seems to range anywhere between 3 to 6 shells. The military versions have 6 shells. So I've gone in and said, okay, let's make the ammo in the magazine 6, the ammo size, the magazine size 6, and then 6 spare in inventory. So we end up with 12 shells when we pick it up. We're going to change the appearance here to the pump. So that's now our new inventory fragment. And we have to change, we technically have to change this brush. which probably not the best to use the one we just captured. Yeah. Well, let's see what that looks like on screen. So this is what appears in the quick bar. And these are the shells as they appear in the quick bar. And then this other one down here is for our inventory system. So if we did all that right, let's shut these down. All right, so when I pick it up, yeah, so our quick bar image doesn't look very good, but we do have 12 shells, 6 in the gun, 6 in spare inventory as it shows in the bottom right. If I press F8, I am more or less holding the gun appropriately. F8 again. If I fire, sorry. Interesting. All right, so before I go look at that, you'll see that we have 6 ammo in the reticle. If you look closely, you see the muzzle flash firing, and you see the red shells ejecting. They're landing on the ground. The weird thing is my gun is, so that's good. We're out. Yeah, so we got a few animation glitches we need to work through, but the rest of the item data seems to be functioning as we'd expect. So one thing I definitely forgot to do is this, when the anim montage for the fire, which is the montage that's happening here on the character. So the character is firing. We're not actually playing the proper montage on the weapon. So the linkage between the weapon is here. And if you note here, it's still firing this. So what we're going to do is change that to pump fire. So that'll trigger in game the anim montage pump fire. Sorry, that's not the one I want. I want this one. I want the actual gun, not the actor. And then this montage is what's causing. I hate when that happens. Is what causes that handle to be pulled back. And by switching the proper weapon in a montage, now when I go pick up the shotgun and I fire, not only does the gun not zoom out, but you can see the muzzle, or not, you see the muzzle flash, but you can also see the movement of the magazine chamber. We now have to focus on our reload because that still has the problem, but at least the fire has been fixed. So for now, we're going to fix the zooming. That's this reload here. I don't know that we have a reload yet. We do not have a reload. So I'm just going to clone this for now. And again, this is the one where we're going to have to do a little bit of research to get it to be proper. And pump reload, wrong one, did it again, grab this one, stick it in the reload. And the animation of that is going to be horrible. The sound effect, what we want to have happen early is the pump open. And we definitely want to have the pump close sound effect here. And the problem is we need multiple shells, and that's variable. So right now it'll sound like we're just loading one shell every time, which is not what we want. But this should fix the issue with the weapon doing a funky reload. So let's now reload. So again, we needed 3, but and we needed.
So I'm going to stop this video here. We're at about an hour and 45 minutes after editing, and that's way too long for what I'd like to put out there. So what I'm going to do is make a part 3, and in part 3 we will clean up our fire animation, make our animation a little bit more robust. We'll build out the fire sound effects appropriately, so we'll link together our piece of our sound effects. Then we're going to do our synchronization of the timing between the character, the weapon animation, and the sound effects so that they all kind of happen simultaneously. And then we have to tackle and build our reload sequence to give us a more realistic variable reload. So we'll do all of those in another video, and then that should end this. But hopefully getting this out there now allows you guys to look at it, advance your projects a little bit more, and then I will get the third video out shortly. Thanks for watching.